Hi, I'm following along with Paul McWhorter's Raspberry Pi Pico W lessons. We're on number 21 and continuing with our DHT temperature sensor and toggle switches, toggling through different states. So last week we did 2 states, and this week Paul gave us the homework to change it up into 3 states. So we're displaying temp C, temp F, and temp and humidity. And separately on it. So just an expansion of what we did last week, but I thought it was worth a video. So let's get to Thorny and check it out. So go ahead and stop it there. Okay. So top part here is the same. In the last lesson, I had a function up here and I decided I didn't need that. So we'll continue on. So our button got our button pin and our DHT data pin. And then we got creating our DHT object. I just called it S. And then we have the button state and the old state to keep track of changes in our button. And then have this is a new one called display state. I had a Boolean variable last time, but we got 3 states, so it's going to be 0, 1, or 2. So I decided to give it a different name this week. And then I think it's important to sleep a second between creating the pin and then measuring. And I did do a measure here before I get in my while true, just to have data available when we get down there. Doing my ticks milliseconds so that we're doing our read every 2 seconds down here, 2000 milliseconds. We're just keeping track of the difference between the milliseconds and the previous milliseconds. And when it's greater than 2000, then we'd go ahead and do our measure again. So this is updating when it needs to, and then we have to set our previous milli time back to what we had. So that's that part. Checking to see if we read that every 2 seconds. Now we're checking the state of our button. So we're getting our value of our button, 50 milliseconds to let it debounce. And then we're saying if the button state was 0 now and it was 1, that means we have a new press. So a little different here. We're doing our display state and we want it between 0, 1, and 2. And then we want it roll back to 0 if you press it again. So we can do that with this remainder operator here. So what this is doing integer division and giving you the remainder that's left over. So if you have 1, if you 0 plus 1 is 1, you're going to have 1 left over. So that's going to be good. If it's 1 plus 1 is 2, that's going to remainder of 2. But then when we get up here to 2 plus 1 is 3, that's division. Divide by 3, you get 1 with a remainder of 0. So this is only sending back the remainder. So our display state rolls back to 0. That's a nice simple way of doing that, so you don't have to check if it's up to your top number yet. This automatically does it for you. And then, of course, you got to keep track of the old state each time through to make sure, so we know when it changes. Change things up a little bit here when we print to the console. So I decided to use a display text string variable here to store each one depending on which state it's in. So we got our state 0, 1, or state 2. State 0, we're doing just a temperature in Celsius, which is given as our s.temperature read. So we can create our S string here. And like I said, we don't need when we do the s.measure up here, it's already storing the temperature and the humidity. So we don't have to give it a separate variable. All we got to do is access it like we're doing here. So it's s.temperature that we can put in our F string. Then we're doing our character 176 to give us our degree sign, and then C. So when we go to Fahrenheit, we got to do a little different because we got to take our temperature and do the conversion and round it. And we're calling that temp F. So I'm putting temp F in here, and everything else is the same. And then if we're at display state 2, we're displaying humidity. So we're same way with the temperature, we can get the humidity using our S dot humidity read to get it, our stored humidity for whichever time it is. So, and then we're putting a percent sign. So once we have our display text, and one of the reasons I'm doing this is because we can format that display text using the our text formatting tools, which tells it that this is to left justify it. The less than sign tells it to left justify it, but to leave a space of 30 characters, so that that takes care of the stray character, covering up our stray characters that we had there. So each time it's going to display our text, but then up to 30 characters is going to be spaces. It's going to white space everything there. And then of course we're using our \R so that we're printing on the same line every time. So let's get this running and show you how it's working. So we got it in Celsius first because we're at 0. We'll push the button. Fahrenheit. And then humidity, and like you say, no stray characters because humidity is shorter than the temperature. Back to temperature and back to humidity. Of course, doing it using our read up here, we're reading our button every 50 or 60 milliseconds, so we're getting nice responsive button the same way we did last time. Anyhow, that's my homework for this week. Thanks, Paul, for all you do. Have a good day, everybody.